On the last episode of the JT Sports Podcast, we did a segment where I gave you guys my early thoughts and preview on the Utah versus Florida Week 1 matchup, what the Gators had to do to pull off the upset against the Utes. Many of you guys were highly receptive towards that segment, and you requested that I give more of my early thoughts and analysis on the Week 1 slate of games. So on this episode of the podcast, we're going to be talking about, will Notre Dame be able to upset Ohio State? What does Notre Dame need to do to potentially pull off the upset? When you look at the spread at the moment heading into this matchup, Ohio State is a 14.5-point favorite. And for right reasons, this is probably the second most talented team in college football heading into this season behind Alabama. You have C.J. Stroud, arguably the best quarterback in the nation. Jason Smith-Njigba is the best wide receiver in college football. You have Travion Henderson, who's coming off a phenomenal freshman campaign in 2021. You're going to have one of the best offensive lines and the whole entire sport. And you have Jim Knowles, who's going to be your defensive coordinator. Hopefully the defense should improve under him. So the reason why I'm so excited for this matchup is because Marcus Freeman is going into his first ever road game at Notre Dame. And I'm going to be looking at two very important things from him. First of all, how well prepared is he going to have this Notre Dame team? Okay, because this is supposed to be one of the most talented Notre Dame teams that we have seen. And over the last couple of years, I was listening to an episode of Colin Cowherd's podcast that he did with Joe Klatt on the Volume a couple of weeks ago. And he said that he feels this is the most talented Notre Dame team that he has seen in the last 25 years. So for Marcus Freeman, it doesn't matter how talented this team is if he doesn't have this team well prepared and coached up for this game. Another thing is that, how well is he going to be at making adjustments in game? Okay, because for Notre Dame, there's been plenty of times where they've gone into games against powerhouse schools and they've gotten blown out. And then it didn't really look like they tried to make too many adjustments to get back into those matchups. So for Marcus Freeman, this team needs to be prepared. And they also have to be prepared to make several adjustments on the fly in the middle of the game. And another thing is that the coaching in this game is going to be really big because you're going to be starting most likely Tyler Buckner at quarterback. How's he going to perform in his first official game as the starting quarterback for the Irish in a really tough road environment? You know, normally you would like to have a young quarterback starting his first ever game against a, lower tier opponent, but to go on the road to Ohio State is really intimidating for any young quarterback getting their first start. So it's going to be on this coaching staff, especially offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, to ease Tyler Buckner into this game. Okay, you want to make sure that he doesn't get rattled early. He wants to be able to keep his composure. And on top of that, he does have a little bit of in-game experience because he appeared in a couple of matchups last season. So for him, this is going to be a really big game. This is probably going to be a game that he's going to have the best ever performance of his whole entire career, because it's going to take a Herculean effort for Notre Dame to pull off the upset against Ohio State. And it all starts at the quarterback position. So if you're Tommy Rees, okay, you're probably going to heavily rely on the run game. And you're probably going to ease Buckner into this game. And you probably most likely would like to get him involved in the run game using his legs because he is a really good athlete. And that's probably going to open things up a little bit. And then also, you don't need no turnovers. And of course, it sounds cliche, but anytime you're going against a team that is better than you from a talent standpoint, you can afford to give them extra possessions, okay? Taking care of the football is key. And when you're trying to pull off the upset, you don't want to give the opposing team any extra possessions. You also don't want to put your defense in a bad situation. So for Tommy Rees, he's going to be really key for Notre Dame being able to pull off the potential upset, okay? But not only that, let's look at the sideline matchup that a lot of people probably aren't going to be discussing. OSU DC Jim Knowles versus Notre Dame OC Tommy Rees. Now, Jim Knowles was the defensive coordinator for Oklahoma State last year. They had one of the best defenses in college football in 2021. So he comes over, and Ohio State is looking for their defense to improve compared to what it was last year. So this is going to be a really big matchup because for Tommy Rees, you want to ease Tyler Buckner into this game. You want to make sure that he's able to keep his composure. On the other side, Jim Knowles is trying to rattle Tyler Buckner, okay? He wants to make him uncomfortable, and he wants to really put the pressure on Notre Dame. And by doing this, you're going to go about this approach one of two ways. Either you're going to send a lot of pressure at him early, see how he responds under the blitz, or option two, either Ohio State shuts down this Notre Dame run game and they put Notre Dame in situations where they have no choice but to throw the football. So for Jim Knowles, he's looking to put Notre Dame in obvious passing situations, third and long, which is something that isn't really Notre Dame's strength this year because although they do have one of the best offensive lines in college football and they should be able to hold up really well against Ohio State's defensive line, the Achilles heel of this offense is that they don't have a really great group of wide receivers. Now, I'm not saying that their wide receivers are not talented, okay? I'm just saying that if you were to ask Marcus Freeman how he wants to win this game, he probably wants to say we want to run the football and have the run game going. If we get into a game where we have to throw the football to win, that's probably not going to be our strong suit. And their wide receivers aren't bad. It's just that they don't have anybody as of right now going into this year who has produced at a extremely high level. Okay, you have Lorenzo Style, Jaden Thomas, who is a upcoming wide receiver who they love a lot. He was highly rated coming out of high school. You got Avery Davis, who brings a lot of experience to the group. But which one of them is going to be able to create good separation against cornerback Denzel Burke, who is one of, if not the best cornerback in the Big Ten at the moment? You feel me? And another thing is that for Notre Dame, you have tight end Michael Mayer. And Irish fans probably going to say, well, JT, Michael Mayer is going to have a big game if the Irish want to pull off the upset. And that is true. However, it has to be more than one person who has to step up in this passing game. So who's going to step up other than Michael Mayer? Now, Ohio State fans are probably going to say, JT, we're going to shut down Michael Mayer. And I'm going to respond to you and say, no, you're not. You feel me? That's the same thing as Notre Dame fans saying that they're going to shut down Jason Smith and Jake Butt. No, you're not. The only thing you can do is hope to slow them down. But these are two of the best players at their positions, respectively, in this sport. So they're going to get theirs. No matter how good of a game plan you have, it doesn't matter if you double team these two guys, they're still going to get theirs. Now, for Michael Mayer, you're probably going to say, okay, we can double him. We can have a linebacker playing underneath and have a safety over the top. He's still going to get open because more times than not, he's more athletic than the majority of the linebackers that you have out there. They're probably not going to have the coverage ability to keep up with them. And this isn't a slight against the linebackers of Ohio State. I think they should be pretty solid. However, this is one of, if not the best tight ends in college football for a reason. So if you're going to be able to slow him down, you're going to have to need elite play from your linebackers, and you're going to have a safety who can maybe man up on him. Looking at Ohio State's roster, I don't really think they have that. So I think that Michael Mayer is still going to get his. But you could potentially find a way to slow him down in the red zone if Notre Dame is able to get down into that red area. And you're not going to put Denzel Burke on him because it simply doesn't make sense. I think Denzel Burke is 180-something pounds. Michael Mayer is 250, almost 260. So that's a significant weight difference. So he's going to get bullied if that happens. So you're not going to do that. Now, Ronnie Hickman, most likely could be assigned to guard Michael Mayer in man-to-man situations. I don't really know if that's going to happen or whatnot, but I do think that's a potential of us seeing that matchup. But overall, when it comes to shutting down the Jigba and Mayer, probably not going to happen. Those are still going to be guys who are going to get theirs. But for me, if you're Notre Dame, okay, you're going to need your cornerbacks to step up against the other wide receivers of Ohio State. Who's going to be able to step up and slow down Marvin Harrison Jr.? Now, Cam Hart is pretty good. This is somebody who I think has the potential to be a day 2 selection in the 2023 NFL draft. However, this is going to be a big test for him. How is he going to match up when he has opportunities one-on-one against Jason Smith-Njigba? What's going to happen when he has to guard Marvin Harrison Jr.? So for this Notre Dame secondary, I do think that they do have a good amount of talent, but this wide receiving core for Ohio State is just on a different level. And you're going to have to need elite play from all of your defensive backs. Now, the big matchup that a lot of you guys probably aren't going to be interested in watching, but I am just because I'm a football nerd, is going to be Notre Dame's offensive line versus the Ohio State defensive line, and the Ohio State offensive line versus the Notre Dame defensive line, because this is going to be a big deciding factor in determining if Notre Dame can pull off the upset, because we know that Notre Dame has one of the best defensive lines in college football. And if they're going to be able to beat Ohio State, you're going to have to get constant pressure on C.J. Stroud. Now, C.J. Stroud is widely considered to be a pocket passer, but he does have more mobility than what people give him credit for. But if you can get him throwing on the run and get him uncomfortable and get him unsettled there, then I think that the advantage kind of can tilt Notre Dame's way. So for Marcus Freeman, this is somebody who is known for having a aggressive defense that really gets after you. So you're going to need Isaiah Folksy to step up in this game. He's going to have a huge game. You remember when Michigan last year beat Ohio State? It took a Herculean effort on everybody on that Wolverines team. But you know who was the guy who was the player of the game, who won that game for Michigan? It was Aiden Hutchinson. And for Notre Dame, they're going to need Isaiah Folksy to have that same kind of performance. And it's definitely possible. This is somebody who had 11 sacks last year in 2021. However, I don't really know how the lineup's going to be. I don't know what side he's going to be lining up on, but hopefully we get to see him matched up against left tackle Paris Johnson, who I believe is the best offensive tackle in college football right now. So if we can get that matchup, we're going to be in for a treat, folks. And Notre Dame has one of the deepest and most talented defensive lines in college football. We think about Georgia, Clemson. Notre Dame definitely deserves to be up in that conversation. They have a multitude of guys who are good against the run, who can get after the quarterback, and they're going to have to be able to rotate guys in and to keep guys fresh so they don't get worn down over the course of this game. And when you look at Notre Dame's offensive line, you have Jared Patterson, the best center in college football. You have Ohio State, a guy that I'm really going to be watching out for is edge rusher Zach Harrison. And I know that all these teams have more names and more players to list off, but I'm just looking at, two key players from each team on, both sides of the football on the interior of the lines. But you look at edge rusher Zach Harrison, and many people in the NFL draft community believe that he has more athleticism than the Bosa brothers. However, he's not as polished as them. So hopefully he could be in for a breakout season. This is definitely going to be a game that many people are going to be looking for him to pop out in, because with this Notre Dame offensive line being as good as what it is, this is going to be a true test for him. So I think for Notre Dame, if your offensive line can end up doing what it needs to do and creating holes in the running game, that's going to be a plus. Because for Notre Dame to have a chance to win this game, they have to have a phenomenal game on the ground. Because I simply don't think that this passing attack is going to be good enough for Notre Dame to purely be able to win the game because of it. Okay, the passing game is going to be okay, but you're going to need to keep things balanced. And if you get into a game that ends up being one-sided and you have to end up throwing the ball to get back into it, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble. Now, Ohio State, what they need to do to avoid the upset, right? First of all, I think that they probably should use the run game to set up the pass because Notre Dame has an aggressive defense. And if you can establish the run game early, you're going to force the defense to have to look out for it. Because when you think about Ohio State, everybody thinks about how great these wide receivers are and how great C.J. Stroud is and how good the passing game is, right? But a lot of people don't think about how good TreVeyon Henderson is. As a matter of fact, you probably could say he's the most underrated player in college football in a sense because nobody really thinks about him. So you can tire out that Notre Dame defensive line early with getting TreVeyon Henderson going. And this guy is a bowling ball. I promise you, even if he isn't getting a lot of yards, you're still going to feel him, okay? Because over the course of a game, when you're trying to tackle a bowling ball of a human that is Henderson, you're going to get worn down eventually. So if you can wear down this Notre Dame defense, and then you can get them caught lacking, playing run, and then beat them over the top with play action and get the deep passing game going, that's really going to help your offense out when it comes to easing up this pass rush because Notre Dame's defensive line is really good when it comes to getting after the quarterback. So you want to slow down that pass rush. You want to have this pass rush thinking, okay, what's going to come? Are they going to run the ball? You feel me? But even if Ohio State gets into a game where they just want to throw the football willy-nilly, I do think that they can have some success doing so. But I'm just saying that if you can get that run game going early, it should help ease things out a little bit. Now, OSU, they need to put Notre Dame in uncomfortable situations. And I kind of said this a little bit earlier, but I really feel that one of the biggest things that Notre Dame needs to avoid is getting down early. If Notre Dame goes into halftime and it's 28-7 or 35-7, the game's over. Because I don't think that Notre Dame's offense is built to keep up with teams that are high scoring such as Ohio State. So for Notre Dame, you kind of have to pace yourself. I feel as long as Notre Dame never gets down more than 10 points in any quarter, they have a striking distance chance of being able to pull off the upset. If you can go into the fourth quarter, right, and you're down, let's say, 28-17, okay, you still have a pretty good shot because it takes you a stop, a touchdown, and it's a one-possession game, or a field goal is a one-possession game. So for Notre Dame, you definitely cannot find yourself in a situation where you're down multiple possessions and you have to get back into the game throwing the football. You also want to make sure that you're able to win on the early downs. You want to make sure that you can win on first, second down, and put yourself in third and manageable situations because it allows you to still have the running game as your clutch. You feel me? You rather be in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 because you still have the ability to run the football versus being in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situations. Albeit you can still run the football, but let's be honest, who's running the football on 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 8? I don't really think nobody unless you're playing Madden. So for Ohio State, you're trying to put them in those third and long spots. You feel me? You're trying to put them in spots where Tyler Buckner has to beat you. And if you're Jim Knowles, I wouldn't be surprised they just say, you know what, we're just going to go all out stopping the run, and we're going to force Tyler Buckner to show us that he can beat us. And if you're a Buckeyes fan, I'm pretty sure you don't have no problem with that. If, Tyler Buckner ends up having a career day against you, I think that you still would be upset. But you would be okay. Like, dare Tyler Buckner to show us how good he is. Dare Tyler Buckner to show us that he is the most talented quarterback that Notre Dame has had in the last 10 years. Show us. You feel me? So, overall for Notre Dame, man, it's going to take a lot for them to be able to pull off this win. Okay? And I'm really high on Notre Dame this year. I really am. But this is Ohio State team that is on a different level. But The thing with Brian Kelly is that he was never really able to have a lot of close competitive games against some of the best teams in college football. But Marcus Freeman, maybe he could be the difference, because there were many people who thought that Brian Kelly was held back by the recruiting that Notre Dame had and whatever was going on through recruiting for why Brian Kelly couldn't bring in top 5 and top 10 classes consistently. And however, we're seeing Marcus Freeman have so much success on the recruiting trail, despite, the grievances that Brian Kelly had with recruiting. So maybe Marcus Freeman could actually do something that Brian Kelly hasn't been able to do consistently, and that's beat some of the powerhouses in this sport. And it really all comes down to how well Notre Dame is going to be prepared for this game. And it's really going to be on the shoulders of Tyler Buchner and offensive coordinator Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees has to make sure that Tyler Buchner doesn't get rattled in this game. He has to make sure that no matter what happens, even if he does have a turnover and makes a couple mistakes, that he keeps his composure. Because when you're on the road, the crowd's going to be loud, so there probably may be some communication issues. So you're probably going to have to go with hand signals. This is just a really tough road environment for any quarterback to be getting their first official start in. So there are a lot of things that are going to have to go right on Notre Dame's behalf. You're probably going to have to get a little bit of luck. You're going to have to get some calls in your favor. There's a lot of things that have to go right. But if the pass rush can get going and you can get C.J. Stroud uncomfortable in the pocket, and you can get some hits on him, and you can get him throwing the football outside the pocket, you have a chance. You can get that run game going, you should have a good chance of being able to pull off the upset. And if you can put Tyler Buchner in manageable situations where you can ease him into the game and allow him to get more confidence as we go along throughout the first couple of quarters, you have a pretty good shot if those 4 things are able to happen. But the most important thing for Ohio State is the fact that you can't allow this Notre Dame pass rush to get in their groove. And I think for Notre Dame's defense, they're going to be extremely huge in this game. This is a Notre Dame defense that needs a lot of stops. And mainly, you'll love this defense to keep you around and keep you alive and keep you in striking distance until the fourth quarter. So can that happen? We don't know. But I do think that Ohio State is going to win this game, and I think that they're going to do it pretty convincingly. I think that Ohio State wins this game 42-21 is my final score prediction for this matchup. So give me your early thoughts and analysis on this game. What are some things that you guys think that Notre Dame needs to do to avoid the upset? Well, to pull off the upset, what do you think Ohio State needs to do to avoid the upset? Let me know down in the comment section down below.